value. Today, friends, we are going to discuss about the concept of input tax credit. Friends, as all of you are aware that when you look at the concept of input tax credit, it is one of the most important and critical concept for all of us to understand. And why is that? It is because of the fact that our entire journey, our entire journey towards the GST era, it started with the basic fact. It started with the basic fact that right now there is a substantial tax cascading which is taking place in the country, and that's where we said that let us try to introduce GST, which is a value-added tax, and then try to ensure that the input tax credit of all the goods and services which a person typically procures would be made available to that person. And with that concept, we started our journey towards GST. However, as we moved on to the journey of GST in the last 3 years, what we have observed that typically the basic thought process was to make available the input tax credit, but over a period of time, last 3 years, there has been a consistent effort to deny the credit on various goods and services as much as possible. But we'll discuss about that subsequently. Before that, let's understand the basic concept. Friends, to understand the concept of input tax credit, you will be required to understand the four critical aspects. One, before you say that you are entitled to claim input tax credit, you need to ensure as a taxpayer that your activity is qualifying as supply. That means you are liable to make payment of GST on the output side. That's the first part. Second, when you are saying that you can claim input tax credit on various inputs, input services and capital goods, that time you need to fulfill one important condition, that is that these input services and capital goods should actually qualify as input services and capital goods as per the definition which is specified in the GST law. The third part is basically that you should go through one critical section, that is section 17, wherein there is a list of items on which you are not entitled to claim input tax credit. Typically section 17, as we call it, it is said that it is a section which blocks input tax credit. So one can say it is a negative list of credits on which the items on which you cannot claim input tax credit. So you need to ensure that the item or product or service on which you are going to claim credit, it should not be fitting into the negative list entry. And finally, friend, there are various conditions or documents which are attached to claiming of your input tax credit, which you need to fulfill. So all these four things we are going to discuss today in much more detailed depth in the next few slides. So friends, when we look at the basic concept that you are entitled to claim credit, from where this basic concept originates? It originates from section 16. When you look at the heading of section 16, it starts with eligibility and condition for taking input tax credit. Means what? That section 16 provides for eligibility and condition when a person would be in a position to claim input tax credit. But when you look at the fact that you are entitled to claim input tax credit, at the same time, section 16 at some places also restricts input tax credit. Ideally, restrictions or blocking is covered under section 17, but however, in spite of section 16 heading talking about eligibility and condition, you can see even section 16 subclause 4 is talking about restricting your input tax credit, and we are going to discuss about that but subsequently. Now moving ahead, when you try to understand section 16, the section 16 starts with the first clause, starts with every registered person. That's meant what? That typically a registered person is entitled to claim input tax credit. Now, when you look at this particular amendment, provision, you will be able to realize or recall that in the old pre-GST era, this condition of registration was not a mandatory condition for a person to claim input tax credit, because there were many judgments in the old era, such as M Portal, the Karnataka High Court judgment, wherein the Karnataka High Court had specifically mentioned that registration was not a pre-requirement to claim input tax credit on various input services. However, in GST era, it appears that the section 16 starts with the first word, that is every registered person. That means it appears that only a registered person would be in a position to claim input tax credit. In our view, this position could be litigated, but let us first assume that only a registered person is entitled to claim input tax credit. Afterwards, if you go to this section 16.1, you'll be able to realize that there are 2 to 3 important terms which are used. The important terms which are used in section 16 subclause 1 is, it talks about the fact that when you are using, that is the input services and input goods and services should be used or intended to be used. That means you are either using, that is the past tense, you are used the goods or services, or you intend to use it. That means a future imperfect tense. So in both the cases, you'll be in a position to claim input tax credit. At the same time, it also mentions that the inputs and that is the goods and services which you are procuring should be used in the course or furtherance of your business. So we'll need to understand what is the meaning of these terms. So let's get started. When you look at the first term, that is used or intended to be used, what is the meaning and what is the relevance of these terms? So for that, let us take an example. If you'd like to understand the meaning, I will one example will help you. So let us say that you appoint a consultant who is going to guide you on GST matters, and that consultant raises a bill of 1 lakh rupees on you, and afterwards he gives you advice. Unfortunately, you are unable to use that advice, correct? So you paid 1 lakh rupees to him, and that consultant has also charged you 18,000 as GST. So the question is that while you paid 1 lakh 18,000, you are able to see that there is 18,000 rupees input tax credit in the invoice. However, the question is that in case you are unable to put to use that advice, would you be in a position to claim input tax credit? Because look at the terminology in the section 16, it talks about used or intended to be used, correct? So whether anybody would like to comment on that, whether the input tax credit would be available or not, whether you would like to comment in such cases, that is you received the advice but you are unable to put to use. So Mr. Paras is saying yes, credit is available. Mr. Varghese is saying no. So friends, before we come to a conclusion, yes or no, we should look at the terminology used. The terminology is used or intended to be used. That means what the lawmakers are trying to tell us, that when you are using, that is the past tense, when the services or goods were put to use, you are entitled to claim the credit. But at the same time, intended to be used, that means even if at the time of procurement, the intention was that you were having an intention to use it, but unfortunately you could not put to use, still it appeared that the input tax credit even in such cases would be available to the taxpayer or the buyer. However, we would like to caution you friends on one particular point. Please note that the terminology which is mentioned in section 16 of clause 1 is used or intended to be used. In both the cases, the term is used. That means it should be actually put to use. That is one argument which the tax authorities can take. And that's where in cases where you are paying for your services, but you are unable to make use of those services, correct? Or goods which you are procuring, but you are unable to make use of those goods. In such cases, the authorities can question or deny the input tax credit based on this contention that they were never ever put to actual use. And that's the one risk we wanted to share with you. Now friends, moving ahead, we have another interesting question for you. What if you are paying a consultant an advance fee, correct? There are many scenarios wherein you will be able to start a particular work, you will be able to give a particular assignment to a client, and that person will say that I will start the work only when you will give me some advance. Now let us say you paid advance to him. Now in cases where you are paying advance to that person, in case of services, as all of you are aware, that the consultant will typically, he will charge you GST, correct? Now tell me, will you be in a position to claim input tax credit on the advance fee which is being recovered by your consultant from you? And let us say that person has given you a tax invoice. Would you be in a position to claim input tax credit? Whether you would like to comment on that? Mr. Varghese is saying no. Almost many of you are saying no. So friends, please note, invoice time to take credit. Friends, for this particular provision, in our view, the input tax credit would be available. And for that, you will have to refer to section 12 and section 13. If you look at section 12 and 13, there is a specific explanation which is mentioned in those sections, which talks about time of supply. That section explanation specifically mentions that to the extent of invoice issued, it is deemed that the person has supplied the services. So accordingly, when the consultant has supplied the services, the recipient can take a position that he has actually received the services to the extent of invoice given by the consultant. because whenever there is a deeming fiction in the law, we have to take that deeming fiction to a logical conclusion. And given that, in our view, you would be in a position to claim the credit on the advances which you are making, or the advances which you are paying to your consultant or various professionals. Friends, now let us move ahead. There is one another important words. There are few other terms also which are used under section 16, and that is in the course or furtherance of his business. Now the question is, when you would like to claim input tax credit under section 16, what is the use of this term and why section 16 is using this term in the course or furtherance of business? Because please note, this term in the course or furtherance of business is also mentioned under section 7. The other day we discussed the concept of supply. There also this section, these words are used. So first we need to understand the relevance of this term. So what this term actually intend to convey is that when a registered person is procuring any goods or services, they should be ideally used in the course or furtherance of your business. Means they should have some relation with your business. So ideally one can say that there should be some nexus, either a direct nexus or indirect nexus, before you say that you are entitled to claim input tax credit on those goods or on those services. Friends, you will recall even under the old service tax law or excise law, under the old Senvad credit rule, there was a mention of the fact that when you are procuring something directly or indirectly, you will be in a position to claim the credit. So instead of using the word directly or indirectly, one can say the government in the GST Act is rather using a broader terminology, that if you are able to establish an nexus, that your goods and services which are procuring, they have some connection with your business, that is would be used in the course or furtherance of your business, then you will be in a position to claim the credit. Friends, when you look at these terms, in the course or furtherance of business, please note, in the course and in furtherance, these terms are not defined under the GST law, whereas the term business is defined under the GST law under section 2 subclause 17. And that's where these terms in the course or furtherance of business is going to be heavily debated in days to come. And how they are going to be debated, let us understand by way of examples. So friend, yesterday we had a detailed discussion on the fact, one particular query, that what if your company is employing a lawyer or advocate to fight a criminal case for one of the director, and one of the employee has accused the director for harassment, and the case is filed in the civil court, and you are paying that advocate say 1 crore rupees, and there is 18 lakh rupee GST which you are paying under reverse charge. So the question which we had asked was whether as a company you will be in a position to claim input tax credit. So we would like to understand your views on the same, whether as a company you will be in a position to claim input tax credit on the GST which you are paying under reverse charge mechanism in respect of the fees which is paid to the advocate to fight a criminal case against the one of the director. So what do you feel, whether the credit would be available or not? What's your view? Do you believe that the credit would be available to the company? Few people are saying yes. So friends, what point we are trying to drive here is, please note, the terms used are very specific, in the course or furtherance of his business. Now somebody, that is the GST authorities, can question, how can you say that the harassment has actually taken place in the course or furtherance of your business? Because practically, rather, the harassment should not have been taken place in the first place, correct? And that's where this term in the course or furtherance of business, that's why we are mentioning that it is going to be extremely heavily debated in the days to come, because it appears to be a very simple term, but obviously it is going to be a detailed debate on that particular term. One of the answer which we have received is, as director is sued in his official capacity. But can it be said that the act which the director has done is actually in the personal capacity? Correct. So there would be so many such kind of dimension which will come to picture, and that's where, friend, we need to be a bit careful when we are trying to interpret this term. Please note, we are not saying that the credit would not be available. Even in our view, also credit would be available. What we are trying to highlight to you is that the authorities are likely to raise questions on this kind of point, and that's where, whenever you are going to claim input tax credit, just be a bit careful. Before you claim credit, just have some rationale, understand whether there is appropriate rationale or not for you to claim the credit. We can take many such example. For example, you can also talk about plantation in the company. Would you be in a position to claim input tax credit on the plantation which is you are carrying out in the company? In the excise era, in the service tax era, there are numerous judgments on the fact that you are entitled to claim the credit. But we believe that this is again going to be debated in the GST law, because again there would be an argument that what is your core business? Your core business is to actually manufacture the goods or supply the service. Maintaining plantation is not your core business. You will say how that argument can be taken. You'll be surprised to know that in one of the advance ruling, the same argument was taken by the advance ruling authority to deny input tax credit on plantation, because it was said that is not the core business of the taxpayer, and that's where the credit was denied. Please note, in the course or furtherance of business, they are not using the word core business, and that's where it's a bit surprising to know that advance ruling authority is actually denying the credit on the terms which are not at all used in the GST law. So friends, there can be few more questions also. For example, what about your personal call, or if somebody is using internet for personal purposes? All of us right now are working from home. So it is much likely that the internet which is expected to be used by the company, correct, for the purpose of the company. What if an employee is practically using the input tax credit, the input services for his personal purposes? He's watching movies. So in such cases, whether the credit would be available or not. Please note that this particular provision is going to create some challenges. Why? Because as far as section rule 42 1J is concerned, there is a specific provision which says that in case of certain expenses which could be attributable to personal nature, in such cases 5% reversal is said to trigger. And that's where just be a bit careful, because there are many situations or scenarios wherein we have seen that the company has not reversed this 5% credit. So just have a look at 42 1J rule. I think that would be of great help to you. Now friends, moving the discussion to the next part, that is with respect to section 16 conditions. Minalji, I will just add you as a panelist in just some after a few moments, because there is some glitch which is there. That's why I will add Mr. Ajay as well as Minalji at after a few moments. So friends, continuing the discussion, as far as section 16 is concerned, as we said, that first subclause talks about the fact that who is entitled to claim input tax credit. Then section subclause 2, section 16 subclause 2 talks about various conditions based on which a person is entitled to claim the input tax credit. Now, when you look at these sections 16 subclause 2, there are 4 conditions which are specified in this section: A, B, C, and D. The first A condition talks about the fact that you are entitled to claim the input tax credit provided you are in possession of a tax invoice. Appears to be a very simple condition, because typically when you are going to buy goods or services, you would be having a physical copy of the tax invoice. But practically what is happening right now in the corona crisis, there are many situations wherein the consultants, professionals, they are unable to courier their invoices, and that's where the companies, correct, they are only receiving e-copy or scan copy of those invoices. And there are questions which are being raised whether the buyer who is receiving scan copy of the invoices, whether he would be in a position to claim the input tax credit or not, because the terminology which is used under section 16(2) subclause A is he is in possession of tax invoice, and that's where the people are having a doubt. Friends, in our view, corona crisis is an exceptional scenario. That is one important background which we need to understand. Second, when we talk about possession of a tax invoice, it is not necessary that it has to be a physical copy. Right now, even digital documents, correct, even scan copy of the documents or electronic records are very much well considered as a reliable document. And based on that position, one can say that credit is eligible. You can take credit even on the scan copy of the invoices. But what you need to ensure, what you should do rather, is that right now you claim credit on the basis of scan copies. But once the lockdown right now also in many part of the country, the lockdown is already unlocked. So it is, we are in the unlocked 1.0. So given that many a time courier companies and all those are working, so you can request your consultant or professional to courier the invoices, correct? And maybe after few weeks or month, even if you are able to receive it, in our view, this condition one can say that it is fulfilled. So need not worry, even if the invoices are right now received in scan copies. But in days to come, ensure that you actually receive it in physical copy. Second important point is that you should actually receive the goods or you should actually receive the services. Now, when we look at the fact that this condition, that is receipt of goods and receipt of services, appears to be extremely simple condition. But please note that this condition is again going to be one of the most important condition in the GST law, and this is again going to be heavily debated. Now, why this condition is going to be debated? I think all of you are aware there are certain situations, there are certain scenarios wherein it is likely that a company might pay for certain services which they don't receive. Correct? There are scenarios wherein in a particular company, we are, I think all of you would be also aware, and we have also come across, wherein a company might only take an invoice from a particular person without actually receiving the goods or services. These cases are typically referred as fake invoicing cases. So in fake invoicing cases, a person, that is the buyer, typically doesn't receive any goods or services. Now, what is happening right now? Even in case of fake invoicing, many of the companies, typically whatever invoice is received by them and whatever GST is charged to them, typically they claim input tax credit, correct? But because of this particular clause, that is section 16 subclause 2 subclause B, the likeliness of your credit being denied on fake invoices, in case there are any fake invoices in your organization, is extremely high, because the specific provision talks about the fact that you need to receive the goods or services. And as all of you are aware that in case of fake invoicing or bogus invoicing, the goods or services are typically not received. And that's where, friends, please try to identify this kind of transaction in your company if there are any, and then try to reverse the credit at the earliest, because this kind of cases are already being unearthed throughout India. You would have also come across in various news reports that there are hundreds of crores of fake invoices or thousands of crores of fake invoices which are being raised. And that's where, in case you are recipient of this one of the invoices, just be extremely careful. Try to ensure that you don't claim any input tax credit. Obviously, at the first step, you should not rather get into this kind of transaction. But in case you already find yourself in this kind of transaction, ensure that you are not claiming any input tax credit, because there are extremely stringent provisions which are there under the GST law apart from denial of input tax credit, which with respect to fake invoices. Now, third important condition, friend, with respect to input tax credit is that the tax which is being charged to you should be actually paid by your supplier. And this condition, I think, is one of the most critical condition for all of us, because what is happening, that while when I am receiving the goods or services from my vendor, what I get actually, before I onboard a vendor in the company, typically what all of us do, we will ask him to provide a GST registration certificate. So that person will provide us a GST registration certificate. So you know that person is registered. After that, he will supply the goods. So let us say that in the month of June, he is supplying you the goods. So you have received the goods. After that, you make the payment, because immediately after receipt of goods, typically payments are released. You also are receiving the copy of the tax invoices. So ideally in the month of June, you will say that I will be in a position to claim the credit, and you claim the credit also. But what happens, as all of you are aware, that many a time, some of the vendors do not file their GST R1, or they file their GST R1, but they do not file their GST R3B. So in such cases, the problem is that typically based on section 16 subclause 2 subclause C, which we are discussing, the authorities are likely to deny the credit to the buyer, because section 16 subclause 2 subclause C, what it says, that the tax which is charged to you should be actually paid to the government. Now, as all of you are aware that in case a vendor is not paying the taxes, the likeliness of the credit being denied to you based on this provision is now much higher. And that's where, friends, in cases where your vendor is not paying taxes, you need to be extremely cautious or careful. If you ask us as a professional, what is your take or what is our view on this particular subject matter, friends, in our view, based on this provision, the input tax credit cannot be denied to the buyers. Why? Because look at the fate of the buyer, the genuine buyer. I'm not talking about a fake invoicing buyer. I'm saying genuine buyer who is having the registration certificate of the vendor, who is having the tax invoice of the vendor, who is having the goods or services which is being supplied by the vendor, and who has made payment to the respective vendor. As a buyer, I have taken all the precautions. Now, as a buyer, what steps I can take further? How can I force, even if I come to know about the fact that somebody is not filing the returns, what can I do is, except sending few emails and doing some calls to him? Can I, as a buyer, can I issue him a summon? Can I issue him a show cause notice? Practically no. So it is not for the buyer to take any actions. Rather, it is the responsibility of the GSTN or responsibility of the GST authorities to issue appropriate notices to all such vendors who are not filing the returns. because as a GSTN, as GST Council or GST Authority, they are every moment they are aware who is filing the returns and who is not. Additionally, friends, I think all of you are aware that when GST was to be introduced on 1st of July 2017, that time there was a detailed discussion on the mechanism for GST returns. And you would be aware that there was a mechanism called as GSTR 1, 2 and 3. However, this mechanism of 1, 2, 3 never materialized. Even right now, we are filing GSTR 1 and 3B. And that's where when the detailed mechanism through which a buyer can on a real-time basis come to know whether somebody is filing return or not, that itself is not put into place, how then a buyer can be asked to reverse the credit because the vendors are not filing. Additionally, you would be aware, friend, that section 149 talks about compliance rating. This compliance rating was to be made available maybe in the end of the first year of GST, but even after 3 years we are into GST, still now as far as section 149 compliance rating is concerned, still now it has not been made available in the public domain. And that's where when the GSTN or GST authorities are not doing enough thing and not ensuring that the buyer is well informed, how the buyer can be penalized for the actions of the vendor, because it is not, buyer is not a non-compliant person, correct? It is the vendor who is non-compliant. So how that can happen? How you can penalize a buyer? Additionally, friend, if you say that the buyer is expected to ensure that the taxes are paid to the government, then practically you are standing as a guarantor to every supplier. You are literally standing as a guarantor to every supplier that whenever you are going to buy from them, practically whatever is the GST liability, you are standing as a guarantee to the government that all these buyers will make payment of GST. That's extremely that's a unfortunate scenario which is there under the GST law, and it's this kind of provision certainly is going to get questioned in the High Court and Supreme Court of the country. And as all of you are aware, there is one particular important article in the Constitution of India, that is Article 300A, which talks about your right to property. I think based on this particular article, this kind of provisions would be certainly struck down. And you would also be aware that these terms, actually paid and non-payment by vendor and the credit being denied to the buyer, this is not something unique to GST law. Even under the VAT regime, these kind of things used to happen. And that's where even under the VAT law, there are many cases, including on-quest merchandise case law is there, TVS Motors case law is there, wherein the Supreme Court has specifically mentioned that you cannot, as a tax authorities, you cannot deny credit to a genuine buyer. And that's where, friends, whereas section 2 subclause C talks about the fact that the buyer can be denied the credit, in our view, based on the various case laws as well as the constitutional provisions, one can say that the input tax credit would be available to you even if the buyer even if the vendor is not making payment to the government. But friends, we would like to caution you here. We are not at all suggesting that you should be extremely careless about your vendor. We are not suggesting that. You need to ensure that your vendors are appropriately filing the return. But in case, even after the follow-up, if some vendors are not filing the return, then you can take this position that as a buyer, my input tax credit should not be denied. So I should not be denied the input tax credit, it should not lapse. That kind of a position you may take based on, again, you need to ensure that you need to take this kind of position based on the amounts involved. If the amount of credit is only 20, 30, 40, 50,000 rupees, it is much better to reverse the credit and forget about it, because it is not worth fighting for. But in case the amounts are substantial, based on the amounts involved, you can take a position, and based on the argument which we have shared with you, you can take a position that you will be in a position to continue to claim the input tax credit. Now, moving further, friend, when you talk about the fact that there are so many vendors, which typically every company has, because in some cases, in our own client, there are our client wherein the number of vendor who supply goods and services to them, they number more than few thousands. In some cases, typically on an average, the number of vendors are from the range of 50 to 500. So when you have so many vendors, as a company, what you should do, while the argument which we have shared with you, they can help you, but at the same time, you cannot only rely on those arguments. It is much better for us to take precaution rather than waiting for the disaster to happen and then fighting for your rights. So what process you should follow in case of your vendor is that ensure that your vendors are appropriately filing the returns, because if they continue to file the returns, then only you will be in a position to claim the credit. Now please note, that as far as the current situation is concerned, because of Corona crisis, the government has given an extension, correct, for the month of February 2020 till August 2020. The rule 36(4) is not applicable, correct, and that's where almost all of us are going to claim the input tax credit based on our financial records, correct. Whatever invoices we are receiving, we are going to claim the credit, and it is unlikely that we are going to refer to the GSTR 2A, which is appearing online. And that's where, friend, the risk is now at a much higher level. Why it is at a much higher level? Because it is likely that many vendors are unlikely to file their returns on well within time, for two reasons. One, the government has anyways given them extension, because almost all the small taxpayers have received extension, which is further extended. That is one part. And second, because of cash crunch, the small taxpayer as well as large taxpayers are expected to default in payment of taxes. And that's where, as a buyer, what you need to do, that right now, because of Corona, this risk is at a much higher level. So what you should do, one, try to ensure that there is an appropriate SOP in your company, correct, so that you are regularly tracking your GSTR 2A. There would be many situations wherein your suppliers or vendors are supplying goods and services to you. They are sending you invoices, correct, because they would have sent you invoices and goods maybe in the month of April, May. So right now you can check, have they filed the returns or not. If they have not, then you can send an email to them, and you should do this kind of activity on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And once you know that there are certain vendors who are not filing the return, then try to ensure that there is appropriate communication from the procurement or purchase department of yours with those respective vendors, because once that happens, then typically we have seen that vendors do file the return. And finally, friends, please note that we are already at the end of the June month. We are already into Corona since 3 months, and Unlock 1.0 has also started to take place. That's where right now is the right time for all of you to start following up with your vendor to request them to file their GSTR returns, so that you can compare the same with your GSTR 2A. So friends, we talked or discussed about the fact that there are certain conditions under section 16. Once you fulfill those conditions, you will be in a position to claim the credit. Then we also discussed about the fact what are the important steps which all of you should take as far as your vendor management is concerned, correct? And we also gave the reference of Corona, or what are the important steps you should take during Corona crisis. Now friends, moving ahead, let us discuss about few other provisions. As we discussed, that typically section 16 talks about your eligibility and certain conditions which are there to claim input tax credit. Section 17 here now talks about certain restricted credit as well as apportionment of credit in certain cases. Now, what is restriction of credit and what is apportionment? First, let us understand the concept of apportionment. Friends, this concept of apportionment is not unique or not new. This concept was also there under the old Safeguard Credit Rule. So what this concept is, basically, if a taxpayer is having a particular turnover, say he is having a turnover of 100 rupees, and let us say he is having two products. He is manufacturing or supplying two products, one a pen and another a pencil. Now, in case the turnover of pen, which is liable to GST, is 60 rupees, and in case the turnover of pencil, which is not liable to GST, let us say, is 40 rupees, in such cases, how the credit should be claimed? That is typically what is specified or provided under the principles of apportionment. So ideally what the GST law or VAT laws say, that in cases where you are having a turnover which is liable to GST, in our example 60%, and you are having a turnover which is not liable to GST, in our example 40%, in such cases the GST law typically says that you will be entitled to claim input tax credit to the extent of 60%, correct? Typically the common credit. So whenever there is a common credit, you need to apply this particular provision. However, at the same time, there would be certain goods, there would be certain material, say for example your plastic, which is only used for pen. In such cases, you will not be in a position to you will be in a position to claim the credit. But there would be some material, for example some lead or something which is used for pencils. In such cases, whatever is going into exempted product, that would not be entitled for you to claim the credit. And that's the basic principle of apportionment, friend, which is there under section 17, as well as the same principle or methodology or mechanism is provided under the rules. So that's the concept of apportionment. Now let us move further. When you talk about section 17, as we said, that there are two important things. One, the concept of apportionment, and second, the concept of block credit. Section 17(5) restricts or provides a list of block credit on which typically a businessman or business entity is not in a position to claim credit. So which are these restrictions? Let us understand. The first restriction which is there under section 17 subclass 5 is with respect to motor vehicles. Now motor vehicle is a particular entry which is not there unique to the Indian GST law, but it's also prevalent in across the world. So typically across the world, whenever you will see a VAT law, you will always find that credit of GST which is paid on motor vehicle is not given to the tax payers. Why? Because the likeliness of those motor vehicles being used for personal purposes is much higher. And that's where even the Indian GST law says the same thing. That is, whenever there is a motor vehicle for transportation of person, the input tax credit of the same would not be available to you. Please note that there is a particular condition there that it should be a motor vehicle not having a seating capacity of more than 13%. In such cases, in case you are having a bus, in such cases you would be in a position to claim the credit. Now you can find also yourself in a very extremely unique situation because of this particular provision. So for example, say there is a one particular movie actor or actress and she is having a particular bus, correct? And typically what they do, they convert that into a vanity van. So we had received a question whether that person would be in a position to claim the input tax credit or not. Because although the van has a capacity of more than 13%, but it is converted into a special vehicle wherein only 1 or typically 2% will travel, correct? So it's a very tricky question because if you look at the provision, it talks about only a sitting capacity which has approved sitting capacity, correct? So at the time the vehicle has passed or was removed from the factory, it got registered with RTO, it had a sitting capacity of more than 13%. So based on that, one can practically take a position that the credit is available. However, we have highlighted the fact, and I think all of you will agree, that the likeliness of credit being denied in such cases is much higher. So moving further, friends, the one motor vehicle related credit denial we have seen. Now let us understand what are the other credit denial. Second credit denial which is there is with respect to food and beverages, outdoor catering, beauty treatment, health services. Typically, again, you can understand the services or goods which you are talking about here also, they are more in personal nature. And that's where one can say that not only motor vehicle credit is denied, but also food and beverages, outdoor catering, beauty treatment, healthcare, cosmetic, plastic surgery, correct? Even when you are renting a motor vehicle, because sometimes you rent a cab, all such scenarios wherein the likeliness of these goods and services are typically, the basic assumption is that they would be used for personal purposes. The government has specified, mentioned that under section 17 and said that you will not be in a position to claim credit on all these items, correct? So this is the important thing. Motor vehicle credit not available. Similarly, food, beverages, outdoor catering, beauty treatment credit would not be available. But please note that as far as this particular clause is concerned, there is one specific proviso which is there. Let us read that proviso, because this proviso will throw some important points. And what that proviso says, provided that input tax credit in respect of goods or services or both shall be available where it is obligatory for an employer to provide to its employee under any law for the time being in force. That means in respect of goods and services which you are using, specifically because of a specific provision in the law. So there is a law of the land, correct? It might be a state law or it might be a central law. And if that law of the land specifies that it is obligatory on your part as a company, as an entity, business entity to provide those services to the employee, then one can take a position as far as based on the proviso is concerned that you would be in a position to claim the input tax credit on such expenses. So based on this particular proviso and understanding of the particular provision, we have some interesting question for you and we will request your views on the same. Because of corona, I think all of you are going to use sanitizers and masks in your offices, correct? So the question is, would you be in a position to claim input tax credit on sanitizers and masks? Or will it be said that typically these expenses are personal in nature and that's where as a company you will not be in a position to claim input tax credit? So Mr. Paras will come back to your query separately. Mitaji. ITC would be available on sanitizers and masks. Vargaseji is saying that it is available. I think many of you are saying that it is available, and we agree. In our view also, the sanitization mask would not be considered as a personal expenditure, but rather there are many like say Disaster Management Act related notification and provision wherein it has been specified under the various law that it is now mandatory for you to use the sanitization mask. So rather than personal in nature, it has become obligatory in nature to use the same, and that's where the credit should be available. And even if you want to continue your business, if you want to further your business, it is now practically mandatory for you to incur this expenditure. Otherwise, you will not be in a position to run your shop, run your office, run your factories. And that's where I think all of you are saying that the credit would be available, and we agree. Now, second question we have for you: what about the medical insurance of the employees as well as medical insurance of the family members? So first, let us understand whether the credit of GST paid on medical expenses of the employee would be available or not. Most of you are saying yes. But if you look at section 17, 5U subclause B, serial number 1, it is specifically mentioned. What is mentioned specifically? See, life insurance and health insurance. The credit is not available. Somebody is saying during Corona times, but how are we going to specify? Because you are going to pay an insurance amount in the month of April, that will be for throughout year. What if, like say right now we are in unlock 1, so will you say that you are going to only claim proportionate credit only for the month of March, April, May? And before we say that the credit should be available, ideally, as we have discussed, that it should be obligatory for an employer to provide such services. Now tell me, under which law it is obligatory for you to take an insurance? Is there any specific law of the land under which you are expected to take an insurance? Friends, please note that there was a particular provision under the Disaster Management Act, under MHA guidelines. But please note, Mr. Gopalji, you can share those guidelines with us, because what we have come across that these guidelines were amended subsequently, and that's where it is recommended now, it is not obligatory. So unless and until we prove that it is obligatory in nature, it would not be possible for us to claim the input tax credit. In case it is obligatory in nature, then only you'll be in a position to claim the credit. So we can park this question. Tomorrow, when we are going to discuss, we'll be more than happy to discuss this provision. Meanwhile, as few of you are mentioning about the guidelines and certain guidelines, we'll be happy to receive those guidelines, go through the same, and then provide our view on the same. So Mr. Gopal will request you to, Mr. Paras will request you to provide the same, correct, the guidelines, so that we can tomorrow discuss it again. So friends, let us move to the next part, medical insurance of family members. As far as employees is concerned, one can take a position if it is obligatory in nature, you can claim the credit. But what about medical insurance of family members? In our view, it would be stretching the provision too far. The credit would not be available, as most of you are saying. We agree that the credit would not be available. Now, what about the stay expenses, food expenses of the employee? Because you would have seen that in many companies right now, what is happening, that the companies are asking some of the factory workers to stay in the factory only, rather than the workers going back and coming again. They are saying that you stay in the factory for 14 to 15 days, 20 days, and then only you go back, so that the risk of transmission of corona goes down drastically. So that's where they are incurring some stay expenses, food expenses. Whether the credit would be available in such cases, again, it's a debatable point. But in our view, as we have discussed, that it is an expenditure which is incurred during a challenging time. It is incurred in the course or furtherance of business. Based on that, one can take a position that credit would be available. But at the same time, we would like to share that all these expenses would be scrutinized by the GST authorities, and the GST authorities may take a view that typically these are welfare expenses, these are typically staff welfare expenses, and based on that, they might say that the input tax credit is not available to you. So just be a bit careful about all the expenses which you are incurring during the corona or COVID crisis. So ideally, as we have said or discussed, ideally the credit should be available, but because the authorities are always going to debate on those points, just understand what is the quantum of credit we are talking about. If the quantum of credit is only 1, 2, 3,000, then it is much better not to claim the credit. If the quantum of credit is substantial, then based on the provision you can take a view that the credit is claimable, and in case subsequently authorities deny or try to deny the same, then you can contest it. So friends, with this we are through with discussion with the previous provision. Now let us discuss few other important provisions under section 17. There are two important clauses under section 17 subclause 5U, clause 17(5)(c) and 17(5)(d). 17(5)(c) and 17(5)(d), they talk about two important things. One, in case as a company you are getting from a particular works contractor a service of works contract, correct? And if that service of works contract is for construction of a immovable property, then in such cases you will not be in a position to claim the input tax credit. Similarly, if you are receiving any goods or services or both for construction of a immovable property, in that case also you will not be in a position to claim the input tax credit. But if you look at the provision both C and D, you'll be in a position to understand that in case you are a works contractor, that is you yourself as a supplier of works contractor, if you receive some works contract services, then you are entitled to claim the credit. That means if I am a works contractor who is providing services to another builder, now I am unable to provide that service fully, that's where I appoint another works contractor as a subcontractor. So in such cases, as a works contractor, I am in a position to claim the credit. But in case as a company, in case as a manufacturing entity, you appoint a works contractor for construction of your building or construction of your factory, then based on section 17(5), you will not be in a position to claim the input tax credit, correct? So typically you would be in a position to understand that this denial is with respect to a construction of an immovable property. So ideally under the GST law, whenever, and even under the old Senvad credit law, you will recall that whenever there is a discussion about construction of a immovable property, the credit was typically not given to the person who is procuring those services. Now, what could be the reason? One of the reason which is typically taken by the GST authorities to provide for this kind of denials is that on the output side, when you construct a building, you are not paying GST, correct? And that's where they say that the credit is not available. But if you actually look at it, from the factory which we are constructing, correct? From the factory which you are constructing, typically the person will manufacture certain goods, and on those goods he will be paying GST. So in such cases, given the fact that he is paying GST on the output side, ideally the credit of GST which is incurred by him on construction of building should be ideally available. But it is extremely unfortunate that by a specific provision, that is subclause C and D, the credit is specifically denied to the GST payer. Friends, in this regard, we would like to highlight one important judgment to you. In the case of Safari Retreat, recently this particular issue was put across before the High Court, and we will share with you what were the facts of the case. There was one particular entity, that is Safari Retreat, who was renting this particular property or expected to rent this particular property to various tenants, and this property which was under construction was a commercial property. So you can say that this particular property was a mall, and this mall they wanted to rent it out. Now their contention was that I am building this particular mall, I am going to rent out this mall to the third parties, and when I am going to rent it out to the third parties, on that rent I am going to pay GST. Then ideally whatever GST I am paying to the works contractor to construct that mall, ideally that credit of GST which is being paid by me should be available to me. And this matter, when it went to the Orissa High Court, the Orissa High Court, will be surprised to know, agreed with the contention of the taxpayer, and they said that ideally in such situation a company like Safari Retreats should be in a position to claim input tax credit. So it's an extremely welcome judgment, correct? And given based on this judgment, there are many other taxpayers also throughout India who are in similar line of business, that is construction of mall. They have started taking a position of claiming input tax credit. But friends, we would like to caution you here that before you take this kind of position, try to understand the fact of the case, correct? Unless and until facts of the case matches with yours, then ideally you should not go ahead with claiming of credit. In case the facts are matching, then you should try to get into discussion with a senior consultant, maybe a professional, and then only based on the discussion you should decide whether you are going to claim the credit or not. Friends, moving ahead, section 17 subclass 5 also has other important clauses. There are two important clauses which we would like to discuss. Clause number G and clause number H. Clause number G talks about the fact that in case a person or an entity is incurring certain expenses which one can say they are used for personal purposes, then in such cases input tax credit is denied to the company based on subclause G. Now please note that this particular word personal consumption is extremely debatable. What is meant by personal consumption is not specified under the GST law. So it is likely that in days to come there would be a substantial debate on this particular point. We will give you an example. For example, if you are incurring GST to procure uniforms for the factory workers, in such cases the supplier who is supplying you the various uniforms which would be used by the factory workers, he would be charging you GST. So the question would be the uniform which is procured by you, whether you would be in a position to claim input tax credit on such kind of uniforms. Can you say that this is not an expenditure which is personal in nature, or you are going to say that it is actually personal expenditure because uniform is extremely personal or dress is extremely personal? Friends, we would like to highlight here, there are many entities, taxpayers who are taking a position that uniforms are not for personal consumption, but rather they are for official consumption, and that's where they have claimed input tax credit. So you can also explore, as we have discussed, based on the quantum of expenditure and based on the quantum of GST which is there, whether you should claim the credit or not on this kind of expenditure. Moving ahead, friend, the next important clause is clause H. And this clause H talks about the fact that in case there are any goods which are lost by you, or in case certain goods are stolen, or in case certain goods are destroyed, correct, or they are written off by you, or they are disposed by way of gift or free sample, in such cases, the buyer would not be in a position to claim the input tax credit. So let us take an example. You buy certain goods, you buy certain raw material, correct, and because of fire, the goods get destroyed. So you have purchased goods worth 1 crore rupees, you have paid GST on that of 18 lakh rupees, and because of fire, the entire lot of those raw material got destroyed. Based on section 17(5) subclause H, it is likely that the authorities are going to deny you the credit, and which is appropriate also, because section 17 subclause 5H specifically mentions that whenever goods are destroyed, you would not be in a position to claim the credit. Similarly, friends, if you take a position that I have lost certain goods or the goods are stolen, even in such cases, you would not be in a position to claim the credit. Additionally, in case you are writing off certain goods, similarly, even on the goods which are written off, you would not be in a position to claim the credit. As far as the concept of written off is concerned, friends, please note that the terminology which is used under the GST law is written off. The section is not talking about partial or full written off, correct? If you recall the old Senvad credit rule, rule 3 subclause 5 subclause B, it specifically mentioned when the goods are partially or fully written off. In such cases, you are required to reverse the credit, correct? And if you are to again use those goods, you are also entitled to claim the credit. But under the GST law, it is not mentioned whether the reversal would trigger on full or partial written off, correct? In our view, because the terms written off are after the words lost, stolen, and destroyed, one can say that only when you are writing off the goods fully, then only you will be required to reverse the credit. In case you are writing off the goods partially, because the word partial is not there, one can say that ideally you will be in a position to continue to claim the credit. But again, just be careful whenever you are going to take that position. And finally, friend, the words are, if you are disposing any goods by way of gift or free sample, in such cases, again, you will not be in a position to claim the input tax credit. Now, the question you would be having is, what if I am giving some sample to my customer? Whether in such cases, I will be in a position to reverse the input tax credit based on this particular provision, correct? So there are many cases wherein companies typically give a sample to their customer. And we'll give you an example. Example of this sample would be that you are a company which is manufacturing additive which are typically used in paints. So what happens, you'll be supplying a small packet of additive to the buyers, that is the company who manufacture paint, and you will give the sample, because if they like the additive, then they are going to procure from you in maybe liters or maybe in a huge quantity. And that's where the question which would be that when you are supplying that sample to your customer, are you going to say that you can claim the credit because you are incurring the expenditure which is in the nature of in the course or furtherance of business, or you are going to say that the credit is not available because the expenditure is specifically denied, it is specifically denied in the law because it says that disposed by way of gift or free sample, the credit is not available. What is your take, friends, on that? Yes, Mr. Paras, we will certainly take up this point. This particular point is immediately in the next slide, so we'll discuss about that. What's your take on the fact that in case you are supplying certain item to the your customer, likely or proposed customer? Friends, in our view, when you look at the terms disposed of by way of gift or free sample, in our view, in such cases, the credit would be available, eligible, because if as a company, when you are doing advertisement, correct, for business purposes, in such cases, you are entitled to claim the credit on all the GST which you are incurring on advertisement purposes. Now, when you are, then advertisement is general in nature. When you are incurring expenditure, which is directly in nature, correct, directly based on that particular product, a customer is going to decide whether he is going to buy goods from you or not. In such cases, this is a case of direct advertisement. If indirect advertisement expenditure is eligible for credit, why you will not be in a position to claim the expenditure which is incurred by you for direct advertisement, that is for supplying certain samples which can be used, and based on that testing, the customer is going to decide whether he is going to buy the goods or not from you. So in our view, the credit would be available. Now let us take few more points also, and then we will open the floor for Q&A. So friends, one important point which I think one of the participants is also having, what if you don't make payment to your vendor within 180 days? Because what has happened that because of Corona crisis and even before Corona, there was a general slowdown in the country. And that's where the many cases we have seen that whatever invoice which is being raised by the vendor, it is pending since long. In some cases, even the payments are not being released for more than a year. So in such cases, whether as a buyer you would be in a position to continue to claim the credit? Whether you will be in a position to continue to claim the credit if you don't make payment to the vendor within 180 days? Please note that GST law specifically provides that if you don't make payment to your vendor within 180 days, then the credit is, you cannot claim the input tax credit. Friends, herein we would like to highlight few important points. As far as the condition of 180 days is concerned, the provision under the GST law says, if you fail to pay, correct, if you fail to pay to your vendor within 180 days. Now please note that the invoice is given by vendor to you, and it is your commercial understanding between the vendor and yourself that you are going to make payment maybe after 1 year. As far as government is concerned, please note, the government has already received the payment of GST, because whenever the vendor, whether he is vendor of goods or whether he is supplier of services, whenever he is going to raise invoice on a customer, he is expected to make payment of GST directly to the government on an immediate basis. There is no concession which is given, correct? So given that fact, when the government is already receiving the tax payment, correct, from the vendor, why this kind of condition, that is the condition of 180 days, should be actually finding a place under the GST law? It's literally uncomprehendable. Means why we fail to understand why this kind of 180 days condition could be there. Second important thing is, ideally one can say that the condition is put in the GST law because there can be a situation of fake invoicing, wherein you are only receiving the invoices but you are not making a payment to that respective vendor, or you are not expected to make payment also, because it's a case of fake invoicing, because we'll never ever make payment. So ideally that could be one reason, but please note that these are exceptional scenarios, correct? One could have easily put in the GST law a condition of that in case a payment is not made to a vendor, maybe after 1 or 2 years, in such cases the credit would be required to be reversed. Why this condition of 180 days? Because in many a situation, many a time we have seen that because of genuine business reasons, and it's actually a business practice also to make payment to the vendor beyond 180 days. It's a standard practice. So in such cases, this kind of provision actually creates challenges for the taxpayers, and this kind of provision certainly should not find or should never ever have become part of Indian GST law, but they are there. And we'll share with you practical challenges which arise because of this 180 days condition. Friends, in case of agriculture industry, in case of particularly when you are a dealer of fertilizers and agro-based certain chemicals, what happens that a company will send you certain products. So you are buying those goods, correct? And those products will lie on your shelf. So you are buying those goods and the goods are lying on your shelf. Now what happens? The understanding between the supplier and between the buyer, that is the dealer or distributor, is that if the dealer or distributor is able to sell those goods to the consumer or farmer, correct, then only the dealer should make payment to the respective manufacturer. And in some cases it is also specified that even if the goods are sold to the farmers, the dealer or distributor will only make payment to the respective manufacturer when he receives money from the farmer. Now practically what happens, friend, in many a time that the farmers will only make payment once the crop, like say the Rabi Hangam or Hangam is actually over. So in those cases only he is going to make the payment, correct? And in such cases, the distributor or dealer will make payment after 1 year or 2 years. And given that kind of a scenario, we have seen that the dealer or distributor who are into this kind of business and wherein there is a clear understanding between the manufacturer and the dealer that he is going to make payment when he receives the payment. In such kind of a scenario, because of this 180 days condition, they are denied the credit, correct? So it's a genuine case, but still because of this unreasonable condition, the provision is actually creating challenges for the taxpayer. So what is the takeaway for all of us? One, in case you are not making payment to your vendor, this condition is going to hit you and you'll be required to reverse the credit. But at the same time, you can try to explore a position. Can you say that the word fails to pay, which is specified in the GST law, is only going to trigger when there is a failure of payment to the respective vendor? Can you say that there is no failure of payment to the respective vendor, because as far as contractual understanding between both of us, that is the sub buyer and the vendor, is concerned, it is agreed that the payment will be happening after 1 year. So there is no failure of payment. And can you take a position based on that there is no failure of payment, and that's why you'll be in a position to continuously claim the credit? Friends, please note that this position, if you take, it is going to be a litigative position, that is the tax authorities are going to litigate this particular position. So just be careful before you take this kind of a position. I hope, Mr. Paras, your question is appropriately answered. If so, please feel free to mention. Friends, another point is many a time many companies incur certain CSR related expenses. So they always have a doubt, should they be in a position to claim the credit of GST which is being charged to them when they are incurring the CSR expenses. So I would like to also understand your view on that, your take on that. What do you think, whether in case of CSR expenditure, whether a buyer or the company would be in a position to claim the credit? What's your take? So let us take an example that your company is buying biscuits, chocolates, and various food items, and they are distributing it to the poor. And when you buy those items, the shop owner is charging you GST. Whether you would be in a position to claim the credit in such cases? So you are arranging a bus facility for the workers to go back to their states, whether you would be in a position to claim the credit of GST on CSR expenditure. Friends, on CSR expenditure in the context of Kerala flood, there was a specific circular which was issued by the Kerala authority. In that circular also it was specified that as far as CSR expenditure is concerned, the input tax credit of GST incurred by the company would not be, they would not be in a position to claim input tax credit on the same. So there are many such views which are prevalent typically as far as the authorities are concerned, that ideally you will not be in a position to claim credit on expenditure which you are incurring for CSR purposes. Second point is, at the same time, we are aware that few of the taxpayers have taken a position that ITC of CSR expenditure should be available. Why? Because the expenditure are incurred by the company in the course or furtherance of business. That means what? that you will be in a position to continue your business without there being any penal consequences of CSR, correct? You will be in a position to continue the business. That's why the expenditure which is incurred by you is actually in the course or furtherance of your business, and that's where the credit should be available. Friends, in our view, the credit would not be available because ideally these goods are supplied free of cost, as well as because we have seen that the GST law specifically denies the credit in case of goods which are lost, stolen, or destroyed. Additionally, as we have said, that there is also a circular which talks about the same. And finally, we would like to highlight one important point, that whatever expenditure you are incurring for CSR purposes, you are going to declare it as expenditure which is incurred for CSR, correct? Now, if you are incurring an expenditure of 118 rupees, and if you claim credit of 18, that means you will declare only 100 as expenditure. So there will be a shortfall of 18, correct? If as per CSR norms, you are expected to incur expenditure of 118. That's where we have recommended to our client that it is much better not to claim credit of expenditure and declare all that expenditure for the purpose of CSR which is incurred by you as a CSR expenditure. So you'll be in a position to comply with the CSR law also, and additionally there would not be any litigation which you are going to face from the GST authorities. So that could be a better position for you to adopt, but obviously you can decide otherwise also based on the argument which you have shared. That is, you can say that the expenditure which is incurred by you is in the course or furtherance of business. Now let us take few other points. There are cases wherein the taxpayer would have received invoices from the vendor for the month of October to January. However, the invoices are not available online, and that's where many of the people are saying, should we claim the credit right now? Because right now in the Corona times, the government has given a concession. They have relaxed the rule 36 subclause 4. So should we continue to claim the credit even for the old month? Friends, as all of you are aware that the rule 36(4) was put into place from the month of October 2019. So given that kind of a provision, you will have to follow the same provision. Earlier it was 120% credit you could have claimed, and subsequently it was reduced from 20% to 10%. So please note that those restrictions which were there in the month of October, November, December, January, you will have to follow the same. As far as the credit pertinent to February 2020 till August 2020 is concerned, because Rule 36(4) is relaxed for those specific months, if you have received any goods or services or invoices in those months, that is February to August 2020, then only in those months you have this relaxed rule, correct? For the previous month, you will have to follow the Rule 36(4), which was made applicable from October 2020. Now, additionally, friends, we have also received few queries whether Rule 36(4) is valid or not. Friends, we even in our view, as far as if you actually look at Rule 36(4), which is actually a provision which is introduced in rule. It is not provision which is introduced in the act itself, correct? So in our view, it is contrary to the act, one can say, and based on that particular view, one can take a view or position that the condition of 10% additional credit only being entitled to or can be claimed by the taxpayer or buyer is an incorrect condition, and one can say that you will be in a position to claim the credit on entire credit, that is all the invoices which you are receiving, irrespective of the fact whether the vendor filed the returns or not. One can take that view, but again, this is going to be a litigious position. So take it only if you would like to contest the same. Finally, friend, we have also received few other queries. For example, somebody had asked us, can somebody or someone claim an input tax credit in case there is a reduction, in in the inventory value. So whether in such cases credit would be available, that is, in case there is a reduction in the inventory value, whether you would be in a position to claim the credit. Friends, we would like to highlight that under the GST law, there is no specific provision which talks about reversal of credit when there is a reduction in inventory value, and given that, you will be in a position to continue to claim the credit. We also have an interesting query for you, friends. What if you are incurring an expenditure to provide a warranty to your customer? For example, you are manufacturing certain machineries, correct? And in case that machinery fails, you are required to supply certain parts free of cost. So you are supplying those parts free of cost. So the question is whether in such cases you will be in a position to claim credit on the parts which are supplied by you on a free basis. Whether you will be in a position to claim credit in such cases. Some of the answers are yes, and we agree. Please note the expenditure which is incurred by you is actually in the course or furtherance of your business. Additionally, in case of warranty, what happens that whatever you are supplying to your customer, actually that cost is always factored by you when you supplied the main product to your customers, correct? So that is always considered, and that's where one can very well take a position that in such cases the credit would be available. So friends, with this we are practically through with our session. With this we are practically through with our session. Now we open the floor for Q&A. We will request all of you to ask queries with respect to the today's topic, that is input tax credit. There are a few questions which are appearing on our screen. We would like to take those one by one. So meanwhile, please type your questions. So there are a few questions which are appearing. So Mr. Ajay ji, we have added to you as a panelist. There is some technical glitch. We were just able to resolve that. So now coming to few of the questions. Can ITC be claimed on GST paid on depository charges? Friends, in our view, you can claim GST which is paid by you on depository charges. Why you can claim? Because there is no specific denial. Additionally, if you recall, under the old SENVAD credit rules, there was a specific, actually it was mentioned in the definition of input services only, that you are in a position to claim credit on various expenditure, including expenditure related to financing, share registry and all. However, under the GST law, this kind of specific exclusion or list of items on which you can claim credit, that list of item is not given. Rather, the government has given you list of item on which you cannot claim the credit, correct? So given that, one can say because the depository charges are not excluded or not specifically covered under the exclusion, because of that you can take a position that you would be in a position to claim the credit because it is not covered under the exclusion. Mr. Paras, I think you had asked a query and we have answered the query. So whether your query is appropriately answered, because the message which is typed by you, we are unable to understand. There appears to be some typo in the message. So you can write whether the query is answered or not, yes or no. In case not, you may please retype the query. We'll go through and revert on the same. As far as time limit to claim the credit is concerned, friends, please note that the time limit to claim credit for financial year 17-18 was up to March 2019. For 18-19, it was up to the return of September 2019. The date was not extended. That's where we'll have to follow the law of the land. That is, you will not be in a position to claim the credit in case you have missed any credit. Because the time limit, it has been said that there are many Supreme Court judgment wherein it has been said that if there is a time limit which is specified under the law, like say there was a time limit which was specified under the old input tax credit rules. So in that context, the Supreme Court has said that if you miss that timeline, if you don't claim credit within the specified time, then you will not be in a position to claim the credit. So if you would like to take note of that judgment, it is Osaram Surya, and that judgment said that if you miss the deadline of 6 months, then you will not be in a position to claim credit. So based on that, one can say if you miss the credit, then you will not be in a position to claim the credit. If you claim the credit, then certainly it will be disputed by the authorities. So Mr. Paras is asking about the fact that in case a imported material is written off, whether it will be required to reverse the credit. Friends, please note that section 17 subclause 5U subclause H, which we discussed, it specifically talks about reversal in cases where you are writing off the material, correct, or the material is lost or destroyed. So if you are writing off the material, whether it is imported or whether it is imported or domestic material, in both the cases, you will be required to reverse the credit. So if there is any material which is written off by you, correct, the law specifically says that credit would be required to be reversed in case of written off. So we are highlighting the said provision 17(5) subclause H, and accordingly you will be required to reverse the credit.